Welcome to the Political Philosophy Podcast. I'm Toby Buckle. Over the last couple of weeks before recording, Elon Musk, who in many respects appeared to have been serving as shadow president, has had his Sir James moment. He has had a very big and very public and very acrimonious falling out with Trump, although over the past few days they might seemingly be mending their differences. I don't know. All of that does raise the question, though. What's up with the tech bros? The leadership of Silicon Valley seems to have swung hard to the right, and not just Musk, but a number of figures seem to be actively bringing a range of very strange ideas into the heart of our government. So, what's up with that? This is not a culture I know well, but it increasingly feels like it's something I have to wrap my head around to understand American politics. So to do so, I've been reading a number of people, including Dave Karpf, his Substack, who is familiar with this, to try and, not through any great enthusiasm for the personalities, but it seems important. So I found that Substack quite valuable in doing that, so I invited Dave on the show, and he was kind enough to do that. This episode was recorded a couple of weeks ago, so although we talk about Elon, it doesn't mention the most recent blow-up, but I think regardless, this is more about understanding the overall historic trajectory of what's happened to Silicon Valley's leadership politically, which, fortunately or unfortunately, I think unfortunately, is something we all have to reckon with now. So that's this episode. As always, if you like the show, please do consider supporting me on Patreon. I'm very grateful for the support I do get. It allows me to continue doing this show and devoting time to political projects. I don't have any corporate backers or take any sponsorships. The show you're about to listen to, like all of them, will not have any advertisements in it. So if you would like to help me keep doing that, just go to patreon.com/political philosophy podcast, patreon.com/political philosophy podcast, and chip in whatever amount seems right to you. And thank you so much to everyone who already does that. Okay, let's get straight to the episode. This is Tech Bro Dystopia with Dave Karpf. I am joined today by Dave Karpf. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, to start, I want to read one sentence of yours. The trick to writing about the ideological project of Silicon Valley lies in taking patently unserious ideas seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Explain.
So that was that from my review of Adam Becker's book, or was that from me yelling about Balaji's Srinivasan?
Believe it was from the book review.
Gotcha. And as an aside, Adam Becker's new book, More Everything Forever, is really good and people should read it. I'm just going to give him a shout out. So a thing that he does well in his book that I try to do on the blog, and I'm going to be doing in my book that comes out next year, is looking at the figures in Silicon Valley who have tremendous amount of money, tremendous amounts of power, and seem to have plans. And we need to take those plans seriously because of the money and the power. But also, the more you look at their plans, the more they just reveal themselves to be ridiculous, right? So in Becker's book, one of his chapters deals with Elon Musk's ambitions to go to Mars. And, he has SpaceX. He is putting a lot of money into the idea of building a Mars colony. And also, the dirt on Mars is poisoned to humans, and there's no magnetosphere. We are not going to live on Mars, at least not this century. Elon Musk hasn't worked any of that out, he's just sort of hand waved past it and said, like, well, once we get the rockets there, I don't know, we'll figure it all out because of Moore's law or something. So these are incredibly powerful people who we thus need to take seriously. And also, none of their plans actually make sense. So the trick is to write about them and pay attention to them while also making fun of them. Because if we talk about them as evil masterminds with this grand plan that is bad for democracy, but also will work out for them, then we're kind of elevating them and acting as though, like, they have it all worked out. When in fact, that's the Balaji piece. I read this guy Balaji Srinivasan's book, The Network State. I read about 100 books a year. It's the worst book I've read in my life. Like, it's terrible. But Balaji's project is now at least partially sponsored by parts of the US government. So we have to take it seriously. And it's a blueprint, but it's a blueprint written in crayon. Like, none of it actually works out when we pay attention. So pointing out those flaws and saying, yes, they have a lot of power. And also, it's not just that this stuff is evil, it's that it's evil and incredibly stupid. So no one should take it seriously. That's the trick.
That's sort of what brought me to this conversation, sort of reading your blog and being like, yeah, because I was coming at it from a position of, I think, like a lot of people, both ignorance and curiosity, in that I keep encountering these figures sort of in my political peripheral vision, if that makes sense. I'm
Yeah.
reading some article and they get mentioned, and then a few months later I'm reading some other article and I'm like, oh, okay, that guy again. He seems to be like someone the new writer's listening to, or whatever. And then you'll be reading an article and it'll be like, this dude, Silicon Valley guy, da da da. And then there'll just be this sentence like, and this is part of his belief that humans will be replaced by an AI which will become a god. And you're like, wait, he believes what now? And and then the article just moves on. You're like, and you're sort of left wondering what's going on here and what the Christ is this? And you kind of like feel, okay, I should probably look at it, but you're a bit almost scared too.
Right. Yeah. And there's a sense of like, well, there's a bunch of reading that I haven't done. So maybe if I did the reading, like, I wouldn't be convinced by them, but I would understand why a reasonable person might think this. Having done the reading, what I can tell you is when you do the reading, what you understand is no reasonable person would believe this. But it's very compelling if you are rich and egotistical.
Is there like an isolation of power thing? This is my initial read from like 1,000 yards out,
Mhm.
in that you see this with like political leaders, like absolute autocrats, just become really fucking weird after a long amount of time. When you've got nobody who'll just say, yeah, that didn't make any sense. When everyone has to pretend that you're the smartest person in the room, there's humanity has yet to devise a more efficient means of just wrecking someone psychologically. Is it just people who, yes, they can't order the death of people, or at least not yet, but that like everyone kisses their ass. Everyone is like, this person is the smartest guy in the room. And they've got used to just saying wild shit and having people lap it up. Is that part of what's going on here?
That is absolutely part of it. There's a This reminds me of an old tweet. I just pulled it up. It is by someone whose Twitter handle, if they still have it, was at merman underscore Melville. It reads, being a billionaire must be insane. You can buy new teeth, new skin. All your chairs cost $20,000 and weigh 2,000 pounds. Your life is just a series of your own preferences. In terms of cognitive impairment, it's probably like being kicked in the head by a horse every day. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's what you're getting at. And like, that's not the whole story, but that is absolutely a part of the story, right? Um, like, if Elon Musk only had $200 million, I would not need to care about his bullshit. And I would blissfully just not know who the guy is, or be like, oh yeah, that's the electric car guy. Like, good for him. Um, since he has, I think today, Tesla stock is doing well, so he probably has about $400 billion today.
Mm.
That's enough money that his every whim is your and my problem,
Mm.
right? Like, his whims are now like, this was reported in the New Yorker a few years ago. Like, his random whims are now a problem for Ukraine in the war with Russia, because when he gets it into his head of like, I don't know, man, maybe I'll handle the peace. I'm going to turn off Starlink there because I don't like that military action. He just does that, right? And that amount of like, that sheer mass of money, of wealth, both is effectively a cognitive dysfunction, because it means that there's nobody in the room to say to him like, hey buddy, that joke wasn't funny, or hey man, like that rocket's going to blow up and that could be bad, or maybe don't destroy the entire US government administrative state like he was doing last month. Like being so immune from the feedback of other intelligent human beings with so much money, I think warps your brain, warps your sensibilities. Like human beings were not meant to have that much wealth and power. um, and that leads them down sort of dark alleys that again become your and my problem.
One of, I find, both the most grating, but also the most pathetic things about Elon Musk is you said, dude, that joke's not funny, is how desperately he wants to be funny and just
Mhm.
isn't. And like, I'm not even saying that of all conservatives. There are conservatives who are, they're offensive and whatever, but they kind of like they have a sense of humor. He just
Mhm.
isn't. He's really painfully awkward.
Yeah.
And the buying of Twitter, he so wanted to be one of those people. There's a kind of like acerbic antisocial wit that does really
Mhm.
well on Twitter. And I think you kind of just have it or you don't. I don't. My tweets, I can occasionally be sarcastic, but I'm more functional.
Mhm.
Here's my latest podcast. Listen
Yeah.
to it or don't. Um, and I think a lot of people really chase being able to have that kind of, like I say, edgy, acerbic wit that does well online. And it's really grating and sad when you don't have it. And he is that just times a million. And I find it both annoying, but also like kind of almost pitiable. Like, I wouldn't want to be that person.
I mean, the fascinating thing to me, like actually as a scholar for a moment, because my proper I'm a political scientist by training. I properly study social movements and political advocacy organizations, even though for the past 5 years I've been reading old Wired magazines and talking about the history of the digital future, because that's what you do when you get tenure. You pick a random project. Um, but like wearing my traditional scholarly hat, um, there is an intellectual puzzle of how Blue Sky managed to succeed. It should not, if you had asked me in 2017 or 2018 if it was possible to build a competitor to Twitter with all of its locked in network effects that just did the same stuff as Twitter, I would have not just said no, that's not possible, but I would have said it in a deeply patronizing voice.
But
Like,
what you weren't factoring in was just how repellent Elon Musk's personality was.
yes, that's actually the tagline to one of my posts about this is like there the ability, and you can actually see this in Blue Sky's growth numbers. Like every spike in user growth from Blue Sky, I was like amongst the first, I was around user number 100,000 or so on Blue Sky. So it's been a while. And I was very big on Twitter. I had 40,000 Twitter followers because in 2019 I got into a fight with a guy named Brett Stevens, who's a New York Times columnist, and it went very viral for a week.
Yeah, you were
Um,
bedbug guy, weren't you?
yeah, I was bedbug guy for the listeners who get that reference. It's now like there was a year or two where all my students knew that reference, and now I make it in class, and they're like, "We're sorry, you want us to know about your Twitter beef from when we were sophomores in high school," and it just
Yeah.
makes it painfully cool. But so like I expected to never leave Twitter because I had found such a large audience from that one thing. Um, and then I was like, wait, Twitter is terrible now. All the fun people have left. I got an invite code to Blue Sky and I was on there and it was fun because a lot of the good posters had moved over. But intellectually, it made no sense that Blue Sky would be able to outcompete Twitter while just doing what Twitter did, but smaller. And the driving force that set Blue Sky up as now a very serious alternative to X is just his sheer polarizing awful personality. Like it should not be possible for one man's like anti charisma to overcome the network effects of a very large online platform. But my God, he did it. He's that much of a bad poster. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's weird is the lack of self-awareness. Because if I had however many billion pounds, and I just, for whatever reason, it was really important to me that people think I'm funny on Twitter, I would hire some people who were actually funny on Twitter, pay them a lot of money, make them sign NDAs, and have them run my Twitter account. But he doesn't have the self-awareness to realize that, like, which just makes it all the more awful. Although
I mean,
he
you can
does
go.
pay people to play video games
He
for him.
does. He does. So I would do it a little different than you. I wouldn't. hand it over to a good poster and have them sign an NDA. I would do for internet comedy what Mark Zuckerberg did for MMA. Right? Like Mark Zuckerberg, who like I think 5, 10 years ago was talking about how like the problem in high school is people would make him play baseball and he just wanted to coach. Like he never wants to do any sports. And then a few years ago, I think it was during the pandemic, he was like, I should become a world-class MMA fighter. So I will find the best MMA fighters in the world, pay them all the money and have them train me. Because like with enough money, and like Mark Zuckerberg can now kick most people's ass. Like he spent way too much money to be good at fighting, but he's good at fighting now, as far as I can tell. Like you could learn to be a poster. It would cost a lot of money, and the posters would rip you for it. But instead of like having a poster, like I actually like kind of get the paying the video people to play video games for you.
Yeah.
Like it's sad and it's embarrassing, but also if you want to play the like end game of a video game and you don't want to do the 50 hours of grinding, like all right, man, you run 7 companies, pay somebody to do the 50
Yeah.
hours of grinding. Like that, I mean, that gamers will hate you for it, but like whatever. Like just don't go on Twitch streams. Like
I
you don't know
think
who I am.
it was a bit dumber than that. He was paying someone to play for him so he could claim he was one of the best
Yes.
at this video game in the world.
Right. He then
But
was like on the leaderboard for like 2 or 3. It was for Diablo 4 and for Path of Exile. So yeah, then he had to like claim credit as though like along with all the companies I run and the 90 children that I'm having this week, I've also mastered this video game. And like, yeah, that's deeply sad. Again, it goes back to like it's deeply sad in a manner of like that much money just fully breaks you.
yeah,
Right? Like what I will say is if I had $50 billion, I'm pretty sure I would get weird.
yeah,
Like like if I wrote about this at one point, that just like a little thought experiment. I think like with $50 million, I can imagine what I would do.
yeah,
Like I would be flying first class everywhere. I would like buy some vacation houses. Like I can imagine $50 million.
yeah,
Anything above that I can't actually imagine. And if you had way more than that for too long, like it would just fully warp your brain. Like for the billionaires' own like mental health, we ought to have a wealth tax. Cause like they just get weird. And then again, it becomes your and my problem too.
yeah. So what's changed? Because what we're describing here, this is nothing new. The ancients knew about this. Plato's Tyrant is talking about this, right? And I think I had an interview on Plato's Tyrant recently, and Carol Attak, the professor who studies Plato, made a really good point, which is it's not just that texts like Plato help us understand our world better. The particular place we're in now helps us understand him better. Like, I think we've looked at Plato's Tyrant and thought, like, oh, this is a Caligula figure. No, no, he's talking about Elon Musk. He's talking about the guy who is, to use our parlance, deeply cringe, right?
Mhm.
And now that we're in a place where we're forced to pay attention to Elon Musk, I think, kind of can appreciate what he's on about a bit
Mhm.
better. But all of which is to say, ultimate power breaking people's brains is as long as we've had organized society. And we've had very rich people and tycoons in America, and they've always been odd. Something's changed in that the tech people have become weirder, and they've explicitly latched onto this far right project.
Mhm.
Now, my understanding is the average dude who works in tech who earns 120,000 a year doing programming on average, still votes Democrat. Not
Mhm.
overwhelmingly, but it's like a 70-30 thing. They're
Right.
not rabid, crazed ideologues. But the people who run the industry
Mhm.
have really latched on, not just to conservatism, but to this new MAGA-ish conservatism.
Right.
What's up with that?
So I'm going to take one step back and then arrive at the answer. Um, the ideology of Silicon Valley, and you made a good distinction that I want to make clear here. When I talk about Silicon Valley, I don't mean people who reside in Palo Alto,
Right.
nor do I actually mean the average tech worker working at Google or Meta or some startup. But the network of individuals and wealth that compose Silicon Valley, right? Sort of like Mark Andreessen is sort of the key figure here. Because on the one hand, he's one dude, and we can see him drift hard right over the decades. He's also one dude who speaks sort of in the voice of capital, if you would like to have your startup funded by the network of venture capitalists, when Mark Andreessen says this is what we believe, those are the talking points that you need to parrot, or at least not be on the wrong side of. So, like, if we view Silicon Valley as a center of capital, it does have an ideology, and it's not immediately the MAGA ideology, though it is now decided, like, yeah, we're good with that. So the basic worldview of Silicon Valley, dating back at least to 1990s techno optimism. You'll have roots further back than that. Like Fred Turner has this wonderful book, From Counterculture to Cyberculture, about the countercultural roots with Stuart Brand and others, and how sort of the ideology of the people who were trying LSD and then going to live on communes, they then said, like, oh, computers are tools, we'll use these to open people's minds. So, like, that's the deep stuff. But if we go 90s until today, the basic ideological story, it begins partially with Moore's law, right? So for listeners who don't know, Moore's law starts as an empirical observation from Gordon Moore in 1965, saying, hey, back then it was every year, because the industry had only lasted for 9 years at that point. He said, every year we are doubling the number of transistors that we can put on a silicon chip. And Gordon Moore, who was research director, I think then at Fairchild and then at Intel, said, I think this can continue at least until 1975. We're going to double the capacity of the thing we're producing, and the price of producing is going to cut in half. That then carries forward into at least, say, it probably dies out around 2010-ish. But for decades and decades, Moore's law was what made Silicon Valley special, because every roughly year and a half or 2 years, the computing capacity would double and the costs would cut in half. And that meant that, like, in 1995, or say like 1999, if you had a computer from 1995, that was a paperweight. Like, it was a more expensive, much worse machine that couldn't do what your computer could do. So that meant that the digital future was constantly arriving. And it gave this sense with Moore's law that we're living through exponential times where the future will be radically different than the present. And this is where we get ideological. What that tells them is that the set of people who are living in Silicon Valley, like the networks of power, the investors, the engineers, the entrepreneurs, are the motive force of history. They are the ones who are driving the future. And government is at best a roadblock and at worst a villain. Journalists are supposed to lift up your companies, but the bad journalists will say mean things like their product doesn't actually work yet. So journalists, again, have no role in shaping the future. Citizens have no role in shaping the future, right? Like technology. So this is a form of technological determinism, right? Where technology is the thing that builds the future. Silicon Valley are the ones who build the technology. And that means what we ought to do is leave them unfettered, because by leaving them unfettered, they will give birth to the new future, the new world. That ideological project, which they then call techno-optimism, and also gets called techno-libertarianism, but like, that's a 30-year project, which is on some level deeply childish.
It's also not that different to what wealthy industrialists have always believed, which is an inflated sense of their own importance and an annoyance with government and anyone who might complain about them.
Right. So we can find that at any period of time. The wealthy industrialists usually don't have Moore's law to sort of like a cultural faith in Moore's law,
right,
leading the government to say, yeah, you're right. Right. So like the wealthy industrialist in any decade, the robber barons are saying, we should have company towns and you should just let like the Rockefellers and everybody be in charge of everything. But then citizens are saying, no, like we shouldn't. Our working conditions are terrible, and your company, like, we get paid in company script, and the government eventually steps in and says, like, hey, you can't do this, right? Like, the government isn't approaching those industrialists. Sometimes they're afraid of them. Like, sometimes they think they have too much power, but the government isn't actually approaching the industrialists in previous eras, saying your special vision of the future will only be given birth to if we stay out of your way. So yes, that is in fact our role. We've got about 30 years now of saying like tech is the future, and tech is whatever the hell the venture capitalists tell us it is. So the government's role is to just politely ask them for more, please.
So you think that the sort of the big difference here is the extent to which not just the industrialists have bought into their own importance, but people around them have kind of accepted that claim that they are the
People, yeah, people
drivers
around
of
them,
the future.
including government,
Right.
right? So, like, if you look at the Clinton administration, that's a techno-optimist era where they are largely saying, like, this is also, we could also just call it neoliberalism. Like, techno-optimism is not exactly neoliberalism, but it's not, like, it rhymes. Because that's an era where what they're saying is, yeah, government's too big, we should get out of the way and let these, like, deregulate everything, and also wonderfully that will give birth to the digital future. And to spend a little extra time on 90s history, the birth of the World Wide Web and the consumer facing internet, because the internet existed for decades before that, but the commercial internet gets started in 1995 in the United States. That happens to align with neoliberal globalization, with the end of the Cold War and this belief that a new world is being born. And that ends up being important for this ideology because at exactly the time that Francis Fukuyama is saying we have reached the end of history, we're now giving birth to whatever comes next. And the idea is, well, that will be global democracy, that will be global markets, global capitalism, and it will work great. The big figures, like, I mean, there are countercultural figures online too, of course, but the big figures who gain voice and power in the 1990s in the internet world are all looking at that and saying, yes, and we'll also have a global communications medium. So the future of, like, the digital future is essentially the future of global capitalism. Like, this will be the communications arm of the globalization revolution. And there's an innocence to that. Like, again, like, this is all based on a project where I read Wired magazine chronologically from 1993 until today, to trace the ideas of the digital future that are always on the horizon and never arrive. And there's an innocence to it when they're saying that in the 90s, because, like, we hadn't tried global capitalism with no bipolar competition. Hey, maybe it'll work out great. Like, if you believe that in 1994, turns out you're wrong, but maybe, like, it's okay for you not to know that yet. When they're still saying that in 2024, as Mark Andreessen said it in October 2023, it's like, my God, man, have you not learned from your own lived history? Like, this, it didn't turn out very well. But that ideological project also is one that says, since we're not going to regulate these technologists and we're going to judge them based on their ambitions, not based on not based on their results, that allows them to get extraordinarily big. We stop enforcing monopoly rules, antitrust rules, after the Microsoft case in 2000, 2001. And that then gives us these giant monopolies that become trillion and multi-trillion dollar companies. We get individuals with hundreds of $billions. Like, Elon Musk was able to buy Twitter because he just sold a bunch of stock, and then he was like, well, what should I buy with $40 billion? How about the toy that I like? I'll just buy that because I have all that money. The richest
I'll
person in
make
the
you look at
world.
my heinously unfunny posts. You will have to. Yeah.
You will have to. But, like, Bill Gates was the richest person in the world circa, I think, 1995, 1996. Bill Gates couldn't go out and just buy the equivalent of Twitter then, because he had like 10 or $12 billion. He didn't have $300 billion.
Right.
But that sheer aggregate, like, we've always had wealthy industrialists, but the sheer amount of wealth and the sheer amount of like the counterpower that should exist from government and other actors, like the sheer absence of that for decades on end, has led us to this point where they just have so much, like, there's so much gravitational force to their wealth that they can just execute on their ideas even when they're obviously awful ideas.
And then how does that connect to Trump, though? Because I can see the story
Oh,
about
sorry.
neoliberalism, whatever. No, that's all super interesting.
Right.
But then they haven't you can say a lot of things about Trumpism. I'm not sure I'd call it a Fukuyama project of
Right. No,
global
it's not.
democracy and free markets and free trade, but they all seem to have moved over. It seems almost to me like that complete delusional faith in your own ability to script the future has just escaped. It's just reached escape velocity of anything that might tether it to anything real. And they like the future of Trumpism, where it's like, what about if we do this? And they just throw stuff out and do it. There's like temperamental affinity, or am I reading too
Yeah.
much into that?
So it is temperamental. There's two beats that there's two what happened next beats that get us to
Okay.
trust. So again, techno-optimism as an ideology says we are very special boys. We will create the future. Everyone just stay out of our way. That is how the best world gets born. Um, and that goes pretty well, not necessarily for society, but for them individually, right? Like Mark Andreessen makes his millions off of Netscape, but he makes his billions off of being a venture capitalist, which is just investing in companies and then making the number go up, whether they actually make money or. And then when with Trump won, right? So after 2016, we get this period that people call the techlash, which essentially is just critical tech journalism, because these are now like multi-billion, sometimes trillion-dollar companies. And whereas in 2011, people were looking at the digital future and saying, oh, like Arab Spring, look, this is democratizing, authoritarians can't exist online. The future will be amazing. Let's just clap for the big tech firms and the big VCs, right? Like that's the era where Elon Musk is getting credited as being real world Iron Man. After the 2016 election, here Brexit as well, but like if Brexit had happened and Trump hadn't gotten elected, I doubt the American press would have gone so critical. We are very self-centric in the US. So we have the techlash years, and that leads a lot of these figures to do a little soul searching and say, okay, we're gonna try to step up, show some responsibility, both out of a sense of moral obligation, but more importantly, out of a sense that our customers and the journalists and the governments are talking about regulating now. And they don't need to worry about customers walking away because they have monopolies, but they have to worry about government regulators stepping in. So they try to sort of start being good citizens, right? They hire up large trust and safety teams and say, like, like with great power comes great responsibility. We will spend the money to behave responsibly. And it wasn't perfect, but like that was a period for 4 years where the big digital platforms saw a threat of government regulators and responded by saying, we're going to spend money and at least try to address these problems ourselves. Biden gets elected, and Biden brings in Gary Gensler to the Securities Exchange Commission. He brings in Lena Khan to the Federal Trade Commission. They sort of start to rebuild the administrative state in the United States. And what Gensler says about crypto is, look, Bitcoin and Ethereum are not just unregulated securities, but all these other meme coins, like everything else, is unregulated securities. That's illegal, and we're going to apply the law to you. And the venture capitalists look at that and say, like, wait, sorry, if you're going to apply the law to our companies, that'll destroy our investment portfolios. Like, sir, how dare you? Lena, my favorite bit from the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC in either 2023 or 2024 put out this memo. It was like a darkly funny memo to artificial intelligence companies, just reminding them that it is illegal to lie to consumers about what your product does. Like it flatly said, if you claim you use generative artificial intelligence to do the things you're doing, you have to actually be using it and not be lying about that. That will be illegal. And the venture capital crowd in Silicon Valley in general looks at that as an existential threat because they had enjoyed 25, 30 years of government not applying the rules to them, of treating them as very special boys. So after 4 years of saying, like, okay, people are yelling at us, we will now be responsible, they then had 4 years of people are still yelling at us, and now the government is saying, you're too big and we're going to apply the rules to you. That freaked them out and also harmed their investment portfolio. So that radicalized them, because then they had Trump coming along and saying, if you just give me money, I will let you self-run everything, and there will be no laws, no regulations. You guys can just do whatever. And they said that is perfect for us, right? Because that is telling them the story that they always wanted to believe, which is that they are the world's most special boys and they can do everything, right? And we've seen that with Elon and Doge. Elon took over a chunk of the government and just said, I'm going to do to the government what I did to Twitter, as though what he did to Twitter had worked well. And like, to any outside observer, of course that has gone terribly. But since he's a billionaire with a coach brain, everybody in his social circle seems to be telling him, man, what you have done, like like magnificent gambit, sir, for everything he's done on X. So he's so cooked that he said, we'll just do that with the government. That has also gone terribly, but now like the planes fall out of the sky all the fucking time. So like that, but like that's how we get to them turning MAGA. We have a period after 25 years of them being told, you are the most special, you are the motive force of history, and government should stay out of the way. We have a period of journalists saying, hey, you're really powerful, you control the world and the world is bad, let's cover that. They don't like that, and they try to respond by saying like, sure, we're the kings of the world and we will behave with noblesse oblige. And then when the Democrats go back in power, the Democrats say like, okay, yeah, you're way too powerful and we're actually going to apply the laws to you. And that feels to them like an unraveling of a social contract. Mark Andreessen, just around the time that Trump was getting starting his second term, he did a series of interviews where he talked about, I think he called it the deal or the bargain with like a capital D or B. That he talked to Barry Weiss about it. He talked to Ross Douthat about it in the New York Times, about how like there had been sort of an implicit social contract that they, the tech billionaires, would build their companies and generate wealth and like sort of build the future, and then they would, vote Democrat and give their money to charity, and everyone would applaud them, and they would, live on forever as like heroes, like motive heroes of the world. And his point was like the journalists and the Democrats broke that contract when they started saying mean things about us and they started trying to regulate us. So now I guess I got to hang out with all the neo Nazis, right? So like that, on the one hand, like that's a pitiful narrative. Empirically, like that actually does reveal exactly how they turned MAGA. Like they turned MAGA because after decades of acquiring wealth and power and facing no social responsibility, people like journalists got mean and they didn't like that. And then like the government started saying like, hey, we need to regulate you like other large companies. And that broke their brains. And the response was like, okay, maybe we should just believe in race science and like the superiority of the white order, because that at least tells me that I am very, very special and I'm building tomorrow.
Right. And so at the end of the day, when people do like these think pieces of what's the ideology, what's the framework, your story would be, and this seems very plausible to me, there isn't. They're reacting to like they've n never been told what to do and are reacting very poorly to someone even trying.
Yeah.
And now they're latching onto a whole bunch of random stuff, but there's not a coherent organizing ideology behind it.
Yeah. And again, so like we haven't talked much about Curtis Yarvin. Yarvin is a fascinating figure who no one should read because it'll do psychic damage. He's both deeply racist and deeply pathetic. He's not a philosopher by training. He's not he was like a software developer in the 1990s who liked to blog and write racist screeds under the pen name Mencius. But like he's now being talked about as sort of this key figure behind the Trump administration and sort of the MAGA right in Silicon Valley. And that's because JD Vance reads him, Peter Thiel reads him, Mark Andreessen reads him, like all those guys who have all the money do read him. But like if you read just a bit of his stuff, what he says is we need to get rid of democracy and have a CEO president who is functionally a king, because businesses are better than governments. And if we just ran everything like a business, things would be great. And then I'll get into examples like, Apple is really like a monarchy when you think about it, which like pause for a second. No, it's not. Like it just isn't. Like he'll just make those sort of random claims. But fundamentally, the reason why these guys read him is the story he's telling is, oh, you people with all the tech money and wealth are geniuses and you should run the world. And unsurprisingly, these guys who mostly didn't finish college and have spent decades now breaking their brains with just too much money and no one telling them no, when they come across a writer who tells them, what the secret is that you yourself are very special and all of your instincts are perfect, they then say like, oh, like and subscribe. That sounds great to me, right? Like if Curtis Yarvin ever wrote a blog post or made a claim that told them not to do the thing they otherwise wanted to do, they would stop reading Curtis Yarvin.
Yeah.
So that means that he's not actually the power behind the throne. He's just like the like, like smelly racist in the corner telling them like, man, you're the greatest, then they keep them around.
Sort of almost like a
Those are
reflection.
not, yeah, like those are not deep plans. That is not a deep, that's not a deep philosophy. Like the other sort of, I think, animating philosophical bit to understand about Silicon Valley as a crowd. And again, we're not talking about the tech workers, we're talking about the VCs, we're talking about like the startup guys. There is a concept in startup culture called pivoting, which is it's memorialized in a dozen different books. Eric Ries wrote about it. I'm forgetting the name of his book now. But the idea is you should have a minimum viable product, like a product that is vaporware. It doesn't really exist yet, but is just big enough that you can find out whether or not people would buy it and it would grow. And if everyone buys it, then like, great, that's your product. And if not, abandon that product and figure out a different one. So like search for product market fit, have no real vision for your company except for it growing, and then keep trying random things, discarding whatever your core was until you find a thing that will grow. And then that's what you are. That constant, like there's a positive side to that constant reinvention. You can make a case for that being good for innovation, or at least good for growing companies. But that is baked enough into the sort of the working philosophy of Silicon Valley that their approach to politics also has that pivot element to it. Right? Like if you look at Mark Zuckerberg today deeply believes that like in basically a bunch of MAGA stuff, in like we should let people say what they want to say online, even if it's like deeply racist or hateful to gay people and trans people. You listen to him in 2017, he believed the opposite of that. And he gave a large speech believing the opposite of that. And it's tempting to look at those two things and say, like which is the real Andreessen, or sorry, which is the real Zuckerberg, or like does he see the tensions between those two claims? And the answer is like those are both the real Zuckerberg, because Mark Zuckerberg has the political philosophy of whatever is beneficial to him and his company today. Right? Like if in 2028 the US has normal elections and the Democrats end up controlling both Congress and the White House again, I would bet serious money. I would basically bet my 10-year line that Mark Zuckerberg will suddenly have another reinvention about how he deeply agrees with the Democrats and all of his critics. And he won't see a contradiction with what he said before, because he has just pivoted. Like what he believes in is pivoting and just saying and genuinely believing the thing that you need to say and genuinely believe today.
One of the things you mentioned, the sort of run government by like a business line. One of the things I've noticed across the Trump era, maybe the last decade or so, is the evolution of that line. Because we've always had people saying we should run the government like a business, and that's sort of encoded with a number of implicit and explicit conservative themes about the superiority of the free market and private sector, the efficiency of the private sector, and the supposed inefficiency and waste of the public sector. It's also, I would say, always been implicitly anti-democratic. It's always implicitly kind of had a vibe of elite rule and elite superiority and a distrust of popular inputs. But they haven't quite said that bit. That's always been very much in, and that's not even understood that that is an implication of what they're saying. It's just maybe a bit in the background, maybe even subconscious. What's changed with that line is that subtext has become the text.
Right.
The subtext is that people can't be trusted to rule, and that's now the text. The text is, as you say, Apple is a monarchy, therefore the United States government should be a monarchy. That their corporate experience shows the way to the phasing out of democracy, essentially. It's become, that line has become much more radicalized over the last 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's right. So like a lot of this dates back, I'm sure they've always said it, but like really the neoliberal era in the United States begins basically with Ronald Reagan, right? Like that's where we start treating government not as the solution, but only as a problem. Reagan, I'm going to flub this line, but his famous line was something along the lines of, the worst thing that somebody can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the government telling you government is bad and therefore we should have less of it because it only gets in the way of markets and markets solve everything. That's also an era of saying we will shed regulations, we will shed taxes, government should just do less because having government out of the way can only unleash potential of the market. And again, like, it sounds ridiculous now because we have lived under that, right? Like the real proper salty answer to government should be run like a large business is, I'm sorry, have you ever worked for a large business? Like, they're not efficient either. But what they, like when they say that, they both haven't worked for a large business, and also what they really have in mind is just sort of magic CEOs doing market things, as though that was the actual business and not the tens of thousands of employees who are stuck in meetings talking to middle management and filling out forms all the time, and like constantly skirting regulation. So that, like, they have a mythology of what business is that's baked into their mythology of what the market is, all of which eventually comes back, like, it all eventually comes back to Ayn Rand telling them, like, if you are wealthy, it's because you're smart and you deserve it, and everybody else is the hangers-on, and society rests on your shoulders, you rich person who believes they should be unfettered. Like, it all ends up being that, which is the escape philosophies of the, like, overprivileged and underwhelming.
Yeah. So one of the things, because I mean, what we are seeing right now, I think Musk is a great example of this, is literally running the government like a business. And we're seeing the, shall we say, liabilities of that.
Right.
I think there's almost like two separate lines of critique I'd go with there. I'll do the first, which is, for a long time I thought, okay, here's why that doesn't work, is a CEO has much more direct levers to pull. If they say, we want to put 10% of the company's money into this R&D thing, people just do it. A government does not work that way. Not a representative congressional, especially not the US, where we, in theory, have a billion checks and balances. Like, they're trying to drive a car as if it was a scooter. But actually, it's dumber than that, I've kind of realized. It's that actually, it's increasingly seeming to me like what a lot of these CEOs are doing is button mashing and saying a whole load of vague random stuff. And then when good stuff happens, they take credit for it and call it leadership. But I think everyone's sort of had a senior manager who'll sort of say, we need to invest in synergy. And everyone sort of goes, okay, and does what they were going to do anyway. And then if good stuff happens, they go, this is because I had a vision of synergy, right? And the thing is, the ridiculousness of that is like, there's not a million news cameras in your face when that's happening. All that we see is the result and how the CEO describes it. And of course, they believe it themselves, right? But it all happens out of the limelight, right? What Musk does is he puts it in. This is actually how a CEO operates. They run around, they yell at people, they threaten to fire a few people. There is no efficiency saving to any of this. They're just making their dick feel big. And yeah, of course it doesn't fucking work. But then, oh, maybe something good happens to happen in the stock market. Musk goes, this is because of me. Well, now, because every step has been documented and filmed and on the news, we can just see you had nothing to do with it. You were, whatever good thing happened, you were a massive impediment to it.
Yeah, you were playing video games the whole time.
So in a sense, it is, as a Marxist would say, somewhat demystifying to actually, it's not like I always thought that, oh, a CEO is a top-down model. They can pull a lever and it happens. It's not like that in government. They weren't pulling any, I think a lot of these people, they weren't pulling any levers. They were at the top of these pyramids of wealth and power, just doing the most batshit stuff and then taking credit for what fell out. And now that they're in government, you can see that.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to yell about that are connected to that.
Okay.
One is, I think we have lost the basic sense that we need governments to do government things, and businesses and markets to do business and market things, and those are different things.
Yes.
Right? Like, we see this in the US, they love to complain about the postal service and how it loses money. And that is because, well, we passed laws a bunch of years ago forbidding the postal service from directly competing with the private entities that wanted to do the wealth generating parts of the postal service. And then we also did a bunch of stuff with their retirement stuff for people working the postal service that just made it always on paper deeply unprofitable. But there's also just an element of, if you only had FedEx and UPS and Amazon, and you didn't have a postal service, there's a lot of the country that wouldn't be able to get mail because it is difficult and costly to deliver mail to them. Right? Like, we still don't have quality internet service in the entire United States. Rural broadband is just hard and expensive. And we keep every 5 years, there's another public-private partnership to try to fix it. And then what happens is one of the private companies ends up sort of screwing the government and not getting it done. But like, if you would like the entire country to be online in 2025, you need the government to handle that as a government thing. And that's going to cost money, but also have public benefit, right? Like, this idea of, there are public benefits that aren't profitable but are good for society, so we have government for that. And also things like having regulations, because if we just leave it to, like, in the United States right now, we're getting rid of like the FDA and food inspection. The idea that like we're going to ask profit-driven companies to do all the food inspection on their own while also maximizing profit seems like it probably won't go very well in all of the obvious ways. But like, food inspection is costly both to the people who get inspected and also to paying the inspectors. That's just a thing that you need to do. Like, that's why we have taxes, to have society, because I would like to not get poisoned by my meat. But that's a government thing. We stopped talking about government things being socially good and positive. And we built up this myth of like, run government like a business and that'll work great. Which again, like, A, have you worked at a large business? But B, there's all these things that businesses don't provide because markets aren't good for everything. They're just good for market things. That has gotten so erased, particularly in the minds of the tech billionaires who just want to be told that they are special geniuses. And now we put them in charge of everything. And like, now we're just going to get poisoned by our meat. And like, again, like, we now just have plane crashes sometimes. Like, we didn't used to have that. That used to be a scandal. And now, like, I'm a little worried about flying out of my local airport because it's DCA, or it's Washington National. And like, that's the airport where shit keeps on going wrong. It's not a secret why shit keeps going wrong. We got rid of a bunch of the air traffic controllers because they were doing government things, and Elon didn't like them. And also they cost money. But like, that, you shouldn't be running air traffic control like a business. You're running it to make sure that the people who fly are sure that you can fly.
Right.
So that is the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing, it is worth pausing to take note of how batshit things have gone as markets have been financialized. Like, John Maynard Keynes didn't like the stock market. Like, he would talk shit about the stock market because it was all pretend. He described it as a beauty contest. The term is Keynesian beauty contest, because stock markets aren't actually connected to how well a company is making money. They are just a speculation mechanism where, in a Keynesian beauty contest, the idea is, instead of the judges voting on who is the most beautiful contestant, they are voting on who will the other judges pick as the most beautiful contestant. Right? And when all of them are doing that, it becomes a different game. It just becomes a speculative game. I think the stock market is fine so long as it is relatively small compared to the rest of the marketplace. But for the past 10 to 20 years, or no, almost 30 years now, because dating back to the 90s, as we've put more retail money into stocks and also gotten rid of pretty much all the ways that we tax that shit, what has happened is, like, every major public company now is kind of two companies. There's the company that produces a product that they hopefully sell for more than they make. And then there is the stock ticker, which is just trying to puff up investors so that they will buy that stock for more than it is currently selling for. Tesla is the obvious example of this. Like, Tesla stock in the past month or so has gone up from 220 to 330. Actually, today it's probably like 350. That increase happened after the quarterly earnings call, where Elon Musk got on the call and said, yeah, we missed our sales targets. Nobody's buying the fucking Cybertruck. We'll totally get full self-driving soon, guys. I swear, just another 2 years, like he's been saying for 10 years. Like, it was all bad news on that call. And then he said like random stuff about robots and also said like, yeah, I'm gonna step back from the government and do more Tesla things, I swear. But the Tesla fans, like the Elon fans, were like, "Oh man, it's awesome, Elon's back." So they started pumping it up. So even though, like, objectively, Tesla as a company that sells cars is getting worse at selling cars, Tesla as a stock, if you had bought the stock before that and just held it, you would have a lot more money now. So that means that he's getting hailed as a business genius. And like he did kind of make the stock go up by doing antics that people who buy stocks said, "Oh, I think this is going to make the other people who buy stocks like it." So if well, like once the stock market becomes so much bigger, once finance becomes so much bigger than companies actually selling their products, everything just gets a little screwy because like that's just not even like that's not how capitalists think capitalism is supposed to work. Right? Like you can also look at this with Bitcoin. My favorite example is probably have you ever heard of MicroStrategy? Just now
No,
called Strike.
I do not know about crypto, and I might have to, but I've tried to avoid it.
Okay, so you don't have to. MicroStrategy is deeply funny though. So
Okay.
there's this guy named Michael Saylor runs MicroStrategy. He's changed it to strategy, but like fuck that, I'm not going to call it strategy. I teach strategic political communication. I have too much self-respect. So this MicroStrategy was a software company that like built software that other companies would buy and use and pay for the privilege of using it. And then Michael Saylor got really into Bitcoin, and he started investing his company's money in just having a pile of Bitcoin. And he became known as just the guy with a publicly traded company with a big pile of Bitcoin. They still technically have some software products, but at this point, MicroStrategy is just a pot of Bitcoin. And what has happened is the value of the company, which is entirely just their pot of Bitcoin, is twice the value of the Bitcoin they have. So, like, investors give them another $1,000 and he buys another $1,000 of Bitcoin. And the company on the public markets gets valued at like 2,000 more dollars, which, like, if you were to talk about that in like a finance class or like a basic intro level econ class in like the 1990s, I'm pretty sure the professor would kick you out of class and like report you to like student service, like student mental health services, because that doesn't make any sense, but it has reliably been true for long enough that that's just the way it is. Like Michael Saylor is a business genius because his business does one thing: it buys Bitcoin and then lets people invest in the company for twice the value of the Bitcoin. Like the company's not going to make money off of that. It's just a pile of Bitcoin that sits there being worth twice what it is. But the answer to that is, of course, his company is worth twice the value of its Bitcoin. Somebody is willing to pay that. It's just a meme stock, but like if meme stocks make you a multi-billion-dollar company and your software doesn't sell nearly that much, now you're just a meme stock. Like now it's just all vibes. So like again, like I'm not a full Marxist. I think we should have a little capitalism as a treat. But I do think that it would be healthy for society if our like massive tech companies and all of our companies had to go back to the normal capitalism thing of you need to produce products that someone will buy for more than to produce the product. Otherwise, your company has failed. And right now, a lot of our largest companies, they might have a product, like Tesla does have cars, but actually Tesla's product is Elon Musk vibes.
Yeah.
And we can tell that because of how much more valuable the company is than the actual direct sales of cars or any of its products. Like the amount of the economy that is just meme stocks and vibes now, it's just gambling. Like that gambling and speculation isn't supposed to be all of capitalism, and now it's pretty much all of capitalism.
That's sort of got woven into the Trump project because they're all
Yeah.
releasing their meme coins and stuff. I haven't fully wrapped my head around it, but there is a like ideology around crypto of not like necessarily even like the big tech people, but like your average guys. And they usually are guys who like it. So it's become a bit of like a part of their personality, a part of like there's this like expressive side of politics, right? Where our political commitments and behaviors are also just about how we understand ourselves and we want others to perceive us. Where we are using crypto in a bit of an expressivist sense. Like it is saying something about people that my gut is it's something to do with gender. Um, but I mean, do you think though that I mean the sort of ridiculousness of the company being worth twice what it is and so on, and also having Musk in there is something of a demystifying element to all of this. I had Corey
Yes.
Moeller, who's the creator of Existential Comics, on, who is a full-blown Marxist. And he said, you know what I really want? I want all of these billionaires to have their own Twitter account. Like, I want to see the live stream on their brains, because nothing, like no amount of propaganda I could put out as a Marxist that you could do as a progressive liberal critiquing capitalism, nothing we could do would ever have the cut through of just having a live feed of their brain and just going, what is with these guys? And in many ways, there's a hubris in that they could do the I am a genius thing. When it was Steve Jobs who comes out in his sweater once a year and gives a highly choreographed talk, and everyone says how brilliant it is. But when you're constantly in the media, you're constantly tweeting, you're constantly putting your stupid fucking Substack out there, people are just looking at it and going, wait, these were the guys who a whole society was worshipping the whole time? In a way that no left commentary could ever have done.
So
that's
yes,
optimistic,
I'm gonna be a bummer.
but
I agree, and also I'm going to bum you out.
okay.
There is definitely some demystifying going on. A lot of my most viral threads on Blue Sky have been like when I read Balaji Srinivasan's book, Network State, I did like a 230 threaded post tweet thread ripping into his book. Like it went overboard. It was too much. And that went viral because people really enjoyed watching me just like ruin the dude. So like on the one hand, yes, that is some demystifying. And I think again, to go back to where we started, it is worth taking these patently unserious people seriously and paying enough attention to say like, yeah, this doesn't make a lick of sense. These guys are fucking idiots. But the bumming you up bit is demystifying is happening and it's not clear what that gets us.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we are demystifying them, but also they have taken over the FBI and destroyed the administrative state, like it is not surprising to me that Bitcoin is up, I think, twofold since Trump's election. Because on the one hand, there's still no use cases for it. Like it's still fucking ridiculous. I can't believe we're still doing this. And it has been revealed time and time again that like, no, they have no real plans. But also, if you were someone who liked Bitcoin, then after Trump won, it would be reasonable to say, wow, all of those lawsuits and scams are going to go away. They'll be able to scam her, and surely that will bring some more money into the system. I think the number will go up. And that empirically would be that would be empirically accurate while also a bummer. Right? Like the scams will not last forever. It will be terrible when the bubble pops. And also, it won't necessarily be anytime soon. So I think there's a lot of demystifying going on. But like when we reveal that the emperor has no clothes, but also the emperor has so much wealth and power that like the people around him say like, I don't know, man, I still think that's an awesome suit. Then he can just like make us plebes go. Like in the long term, the whole thing falls apart and it's ruinous for them, but ruinous for us too. But in the short term, demystifying doesn't get us much.
Plus polarization. Like I think I did that podcast about Elon Musk 7 years ago now, and then you weren't allowed to say it. Like people on the liberal left were saying, "Oh, that was way too harsh." Certainly I could. I thought it was very uncivil. Like really, we got pushback. Like this because he was still sort of seen as somewhat of a left-wing figure there because of the electric cars thing. And I'm going to say called it, and we were right, and he actually is an idiot. But now you can say that on the left. The right, the emperor still has clothes. Right. And like they will still buy the meme coin. And like at a certain point, the emperor has no clothes analogy is a nice one because it relies on the emperor having shame in some sense.
Right. Yes. Have you ever read Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals?
I mean, a long time ago, but yes.
I both read it in high school and also teach it every semester.
Okay.
And one of the bits from Rules for Radicals that I teach every semester and then we sort of pause on is where Alinsky, and for listeners who don't know, he wrote Rules for Radicals in I think 1971. Classic text amongst political organizers. But one of his key claims is that ridicule is the activist's most powerful weapon. And I do think that was more true in 1971 than it is today, because it presumes that political elites will have shame. And like Donald Trump is shameless. Elon Musk is shameless, although when he gets annoyed, he does get petulant. Like Ted Cruz is shameless. Like there are all of these figures in power who have realized, thanks to media bubbles and isolation, and also just too much money and controlling the courts, that if you shame them, they should just make you go away or ignore you, because you can't actually touch their wealth or their power.
Yeah. The emperor has no clothes. You pointed it out. Half of the crowd laughs, and he goes, "Yeah, fuck you, I do."
Yeah. Or like the emperor has no clothes. A lot of the crowd laughs. Then the emperor says, "Hey, Grok, do I have clothes?" And Grok says, "That's a masterful outfit, sir."
Yeah.
And they say, like, "See, Grok said I do."
Yeah.
Like, you still fucking don't, man.
Okay. Bit of mental hygiene there.
Yep.
All right, thanks for coming on, dude. Before you go, anywhere you want to direct listeners, Substack, Blue Sky, have we both now surpassed our Twitter on Blue Sky? Like,
I'm like 50% past my Twitter, and I should not be more. Like, I have too many followers on Blue Sky. It's amazing. Yeah. Blue Sky's better than Twitter, folks. It is. So on Blue Sky, I'm Dave Karpf. That's DaveKarpf. The F is silent. .bluesky.social or .bsky.social. I have a Substack, davekarp.substack.com. I will have a book that comes out next year. So if you subscribe to the Substack, you will hear announcements about it and see blog posts related to it. Book is called Why the Future Never Arrives. That's me.
Cool. Awesome. Cheers, man.
Cool.